Good morning, everyone. It is the Gold Goats and Guns half hour here on YouTube. My name's Tom Luongo. I hope you all had a great couple of days. It's been a while since I've been on it. The last was on Monday morning. Got some stuff I want to talk about today. I want to get off my chest. I want to riff off of a current blog post that I put together last night, comparing, interestingly enough, Jean-Paul Sartre's classic play No Exit and The Good Place, the Kristen Bell farcical comedy on NBC, which I'm a huge fan of. Because it's important today because I've got a little bit of an apology I want to throw out to my regulars and my subscribers, which is that we have been way too focused, myself and the rest of us, and way too focused on all of the big momentous things happening in the world and the day-to-day headlines and their effects on our sanity and our the amount of energy that we spend trying to keep up with them and everything else. And I see it happening on a daily basis on our private Slack channel for Gold Goats and Guns for my subscribers, and it's a reminder every once in a while that we need to kind of step back and put it and make it personal again, and remind us why it is that we do what we do and why it matters so much, and what the costs are, because there is a cost to all this. And I'm not saying that I'm not willing to pay that cost, because obviously that's at a certain level you're going to pay the cost in terms of your time and your energy and everything else, in order to do your best to fight the culture war that's all around us. Because that's really what we're fighting here. We're not really fighting we're not fighting an economic war. We're not fighting a political war. We're fighting a culture war. This is a fundamental clash between two distinct ways of looking at the world, and at minimum. And there are gradations on these polar opposite ideas and whatnot. But when it comes down to it, you've got two fundamentally different worldviews that are at odds with each other. And it's funny, I've been listening to and watching and talking with my wife about a lot of the things that have come up in conversation relative to Jordan Peterson. And it's funny listening to Dr. Peterson talk. There's so much overlap between what he talks about at a psychological level, at a evolutionary biology level, at an energy level, that overlaps and maps nicely with Austrian economics and Mises's arguments about why humans act and how they act, and the lessons thereof. And it's funny, when I do my analysis of what's happening in the world politically, my personal bias is I try to tamp them down as much as possible and try and figure out what's actually happening, regardless of what it is that I want to see the world, how to see the world organize and operate and everything else, versus what we actually have. So I use the phrase all the time: I'm analyzing the world I've got, not the world that I want. And because the world I want is completely different. But the question, of course, is, and it's the same question that everybody in economics should be asking, and they don't all ask this question because they forget, because they get bound down in minutia and their own ideology and their own bullshit and everything else about and equations and numbers and the politics of it, and they forget that the study of economics is the study of human behavior. It's the study of human action, and what the primary animating principle behind everybody's actions are to turn what is and the what will be. And that's all we have. And when you listen to Dr. Peterson talk, it's very obvious that that's exactly what he's trying to do. He's trying to give you a pathway to making, or give you a guideline, a pathway in order to effectively and efficiently decide what it is that you actually want, and then go and get it in some way and get out of your own way. And that, there are different metaphors for explaining the basis of human condition. And I'm getting to the Sartre Good Place thing in a minute. Just bear with. There are multiple ways of getting there. There are multiple ways of interpreting, of expressing these ideas. And as economists, we try to remove ourselves from it as much as possible in order to retain our objectivity, right? There's a great line by Philip K. Dick in his novel Valis, which starts out describing the life of this character, Horse Lover Fat. And if you've never read Valis, this is a line that has stuck with me for my entire life. Because in the novel Valis, this character, Horse Lover Fat, is Philip K. Dick. And he says, at some point, about 10, 15, 20 pages into the book, he says, I am Horse Lover Fat, and I'm telling the story in the third person to retain some much-needed objectivity. Now, this is kind of heady stuff for a 15-year-old, because that's when I read Valis the first time. And I read Ubik the first time. And again, there's a point to all this. I'm laying down some groundwork here. Laying down some foundations. So, as economists, we try to do that. We use those ideas to extrapolate the emotive language in order to just describe what we're seeing in the most objective terms possible. That's what mathematics is designed to do. Mathematics is designed as well is also a language that attempts to describe the universe in dispassionate terms. So we can, as Dr. Peterson said, we can let go of all of our bullshit and all of our suffering and all of our baggage, right? And we can get to the core. We can get to the truth. Because the point of economics and the point of praxeology and all praxeological disciplines and all and science itself is the illumination of truth through the application of logic and reason. Which, of course, are the very processes that don't dominate our behavior. Our behavior is limbic. Our behavior is an endless series of abreactions to stimuli, and we have to tamp those down as much as humanly possible all the time. So, when you look at what's happening in the culture war today, what you see is two fundamentally different ideologies, because we all see the same things. I've said for years that I don't have a problem with many of the criticisms of modern society and modern America or anybody else that comes from the hardcore progressive left, right? The Occupy Wall Street people, that stuff. I don't have a problem with much of what they talk about. What I have a problem with is their conclusions, right? I don't, it's like their prescriptions to the problem, right? So, and I say all the time that there's a vast difference between specifying what a problem is and then implementing a solution. There's a vast gulf between specification and implementation. And invariably, when we have heated political discussions, because we bring all of our biases and our baggage and our experiences and our suffering and all these things that turn us into abreacting, poof-flinging chimpanzees, that we conflate what the problem is with how to solve it. We mash them together, and then we argue. And we never separate the two and try and figure out, okay, so what's the problem? What's your actual goal? Again, turning what is into what will be. What is your goal? All right, so let's bring in Sartre. Let's bring in The Good Place. So Sartre wrote a play back in the 20s called No Exit. And No Exit is about three people locked in a very nice room together after they've died. And they think they don't understand what's going on. They're like, well, when are we going to hell? Because we're obviously bad. Because but they refuse to admit to themselves that they're bad people for God knows how long, until they finally, talk amongst themselves, and we all realize that, oh my God, they're horrible people, and that the whole play is about them torturing each other, and that, oh my God, being locked in the room with these other people is what hell is. Hell is other people. And that's the premise behind The Good Place. If you've not, I hate to spoil the season 1 ender or anything, but that's kind of exactly what's going on in The Good Place. Except that we think that they're all in heaven, right? So all these people are died. So Kristen Bell's character and all the others, there are 4 principals, and that Ted Danson's playing this angel, who's their benefactor, and here's the good, and they live in the good place because they were good people. And Kristen Bell's like, I wasn't a good person. So how did this happen? And she knows that she's not a good person, fundamentally. So she should be in hell. She should be in the bad place. Well, it turns out that she really is in the bad place. They're all in the bad place, and that this is a grand experiment, a la Sartre, to prove to them that we're going to torture them by putting them all in this idyllic community together and then watch them destroy each other. And that's like the most exquisite form of torture. And that Ted Danson's actually playing a vile demon. But the point is, and if you look at it, the point is that The Good Place actually turns Sartre on its head. And I think that this show was pitched to the cynical, vile execs over at NBC, who thought, "Hey, this is great. We get to make fun of religion by we get to make fun of flyover country conservatives by reducing heaven and hell to a points-based system. Oh, you kicked the dog once. That's negative 500 points, and while you helped an old lady cross the street, that's only worth 3 points. And so you're at minus 497, and you go to hell." That's the premise. I'm thinking to myself, that's an easy way to get this to go in. It seems to me like it almost feels like this show was a sandbag, in much the way that Vince Gilligan, I think, sandbagged the execs over at AMC with Breaking Bad, because he pitched Breaking Bad to them as a farce. Because if you watch season 1 of Breaking Bad, it's absolute freaking black comedy. But his goal was to tell the most devastating indictment of the drug war ever, which he succeeded in doing quite explicitly, because there's a major fundamental change between the tone of season 1 and season 2 of Breaking Bad. So make the show a hit by letting everybody think it's comedy, and something that they can laugh at. And in this terribly ironic age, having something that you can laugh at is a lot easier, because when you're laughing at something, you don't have any emotional stake in it. You get to feel superior to the material. You get to feel superior to the people that you're watching. And most sitcoms are built on this idea of watching stupid people make bad decisions, which you get to laugh at and feel good about yourself, even though you're just as miserable as they are, as Dr. Peterson put it. The harder thing is to build comedy that you laugh with. And that's interesting. That's the interesting part about where The Good Place goes, because The Good Place takes this premise, and we get to watch Kristen Bell's character, Eleanor, who's not a nice person, who's a terrible person. She's a user, and she's miserable, and she's self-absorbed, and she's angry, and she's all of these things. But she's also skeptical. She's distrustful. And she uses her distrust and her skepticism to figure everything out. And she turns her weakness into a strength, which is very similar to what Dr. Peterson's always talking about. Look, you have all of these faults. You have all of this baggage. You've suffered this. You've got all these things that are happening to you. You have all these reasons to be a victim. Every bit of your entire life is nothing but one big litany of why you should be a victim. Yeah, I agree. I can sit here and talk to you about my own life and tell you how, I got screwed over by my family, and I got this, and I did all the right things, and I got all this stuff, and it's terrible. My wife and I spent 10 years of our lives building a home, and in order to raise it, in order to have a child, and then take care of my mom, and then it all fell apart. No one cared. Wasn't enough. The pain of it was debilitating, to a point where, it was debilitating. You still have to dust yourself off, get up in the morning, and take care of your responsibilities. And those skills that were garnered, the realization when you look back over the course of your life, and you realize, well, I did do that. That was good. And I did do this, and that was pretty good. I did have these moments where I wasn't a complete shit. And that's okay. We can work with that. And you keep moving forward, because you don't have any other option. And so in this case, by The Good Place saying, no, people have the capacity to internalize and accept the bad things that they've done, and then turn them into strengths, and realize that those are bad things, and tomorrow's another day, completely turns Sartre on its head, completely undermines the postmodernist, completely undermines the nihilistic conceit that the world is meaningless, the universe is indifferent and doesn't give a fuck about you. The universe is indifferent and doesn't give us a fuck about you. And guess what? That doesn't mean that your life is meaningless. It doesn't mean that. It only means that if you allow it to mean that. So if you want to make the world a better place, make the world a better place. But accept the responsibility that you can only change what you can change. Right? And in fact, in Eleanor's case, by her being willing and open to change, through her trying to stay in the good place, because she don't want to go to hell, by acting selfishly, she's figuring out how it is that she can get leverage on Michael in order to stay, and then everybody, and now the whole thing like blows up, and season 2 is freaking completely off the rails and very cool because of where it takes everything. It's very interesting. And the people involved are getting better. They're becoming better people by virtue of the fact that they want to become better people, and therefore they can be. It's actually really good stuff. And it's terribly subversive in this ironic, postmodern, cynical world that we live in, where most of what we see on television is not that. We see the opposite. We see people wallowing in filth. We see police crime dramas and procedurals. We see an endless procession of Dick Wolf procedurals, where disinterested detectives solve heinous crimes. And maybe because they care, or maybe they don't, or maybe they just happen to have skill sets. When you think about it, in the last 15 years, we've had no less than 3 different incarnations of Sherlock Holmes become incredibly popular. And Sherlock Holmes is the ultimate sociopathic detective who has no internal soul. He has no animating principle other than, and all of the versions that we've seen, Benedict Cumberbatch's in Sherlock, Johnny Lee Miller's in Elementary, and Hugh Laurie's in House, they're all Sherlock Holmes. And they're all terribly flawed characters. Only one of them actually gives a shit about humanity, and that's House. The other 2 were completely self-absorbed narcissistic addicts who are the way they are because they need the stimulation in order to keep from going crazy. In Johnny Lee Miller's case, in Elementary's case, is to go back to being a heroin addict, and in Sherlock's case, is just to be a thief. Yes. So in the end of the day, the point I make in the article that I wrote yesterday was that The Good Place actually winds up being closer to Philip K. Dick's Ubik, or The Matrix, which is a retelling of Ubik, than Jean-Paul Sartre's No Exit. And that it has incredible lessons for us to keep our humanity while we fight the culture war. And if you guys have not read Philip K. Dick's Ubik, I heartily recommend it. It is one of the great novels of the 20th century. It is the book that changed my life. I read Ubik for the first time when I was, I think, 15. And I immediately read it again. And then I read it again. And then I read it every year on June 5th, because that's the day the book opens, until I was like 35 years old. I've read Ubik so many times, I can practically recite half of it. But Ubik is about people who die, or who are having to grow up after having been dead, or having been killed, or nearly killed. And then becoming masters of their own fate, masters of the universe, and being willing to accept the fact that they are going to die. And that is the struggle against death and against entropy and against chaos. That is all that matters in the world. And that if we ask for it, the universe will find a way to give us help. But we have to be willing to ask for it. Because help is there. It's in the form of other people. Certainly in the form of other people. Again, hell is not other people. Hell is loneliness. And Ubik is by far Philip K. Dick's best work. And even more applicable today than it was was when it was published in 1969 and when it was written in 1966. It is by far his best work. It is short. It will take you 4 hours to read. But it will take you, like Othello, like that stupid game Othello, a minute to read and a lifetime to master. I could sit here and do hours talking about Ubik and how important it is and why Ubik is unfilmable now, even though many people have tried, because it's been retold in film form and variations in film form 1,000 times. And we've already used and internalized all the lessons of Ubik so many different ways. So, and I think Dick wrote Ubik as a reaction to No Exit, if you want now that I think about it, because Dick was a humanist. He was postmodernist style writer. I mean, he believed in text. He believed in texts that were self-aware, texts that knew they were texts, right? I mean, I opened this discussion with, the passage from Malice where he said, I am horse lover fat, and I'm writing this book in the third person to regain some much needed objectivity. Well, think about that for a second. That's a text that's self-aware. Hamlet is a self-aware text. It knows that it's a play within a play within a play. What are you reading, my lord? Words. Words are all we have. Tom Stoppard's Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead is a perfect example of highlighting just how postmodern Hamlet actually is. But understand that the text being self-aware is not an end. It's just a means. It's a means to tell human stories. It's a means to tell archetypal stories. And if it's not that, then it's horseshit. Which brings me back to Sartre and Derrida and Foucault and all these people, and why they're going to lose the culture war. Because while Peterson's fantastic in illuminating and getting you to examine your own and confront your own inadequacies as a person, he's also telling you that none of it matters and you still overcome. And he's the self-described depressive type and is amazed at that how all of these flawed and literally and suffering people still go out and have the lights, that maintain the lights and maintain the internet and maintain all of the trappings of society. Because the opposite of that is suicide. The opposite of that is oblivion. The opposite of that is the abyss. And I just don't, and I think we all fundamentally understand that. And he's amazed by it. And I'm similarly amazed by it, but at the same time, I don't take the opinion, and I never have, no matter how much I've suffered in my life, and I have suffered. I see people as being unbelievably fantastic and being able to overcome all the obstacles put in their path and still create great things. And then to watch with horror 20-somethings tell me that, or 30-somethings, or 40-somethings tell me that we're going to complain about the trappings of capitalism, the trappings of great individual achievement from our fucking iPhones. So they sit on Facebook, having all of their data harvested day in and day out by the very people who are destroying their lives, the very people who are causing all of their suffering, complaining by writing onto Facebook from their iPhone about how terrible the capitalist system is. You have a fucking goddamn miracle in your hands. And you're complaining about it. Miracles are all around you every day. I'm not a particularly religious person. I am kind of spiritual, but I'm not terribly religious. I don't believe in, again, specification and implementation. I like the ideas behind most religions. I don't like the way they've been implemented. Now, in the immortal words of the sheriff from the end of O Brother, Where Art Thou? When confronting George Clooney, who said, I've been pardoned by the governor herself. You can look it up. It's the law. You're like, the law? The law is a human institution. Meaning you are guilty of crimes that are bigger than anything that humans have ever written down. Fundamental crimes against being. And it's a wonderful moment in a wonderful movie. Again, written by terribly humanist people who, the Coen brothers, who generally make films about people who we laugh at, not laugh with. and yet still somehow are able to get us to feel for them, not at them. All right, I'm Tom Luongo. This has been the Gold Goats and Guns Half Hour. You can follow me. If you liked what you heard today, you can follow me here on YouTube. You can follow me on Periscope. I'll be on Periscope on Monday nights at 8 o'clock and Friday nights at 9 o'clock. You can just look up Tom Luongo on Periscope. You can also follow me at goldgoatsandguns.com, where I write on a regular basis. You can, if you really like what you have to say here, see here today, you can sign up for my Patreon at patreon.com/goldgoatsandguns. Please, if you did like it, please give a like, please give a subscribe. Really helps with the vile Google algorithms. You guys take care. You have a great afternoon, and keep your stick on the ice.